Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for the Psychology of Teams Illuminating the Hidden Factors of High Performing Teams webinar. My name is Vicky Keeler and I'm the Marketing Manager at the Myers-Briggs company. Today's webinar will run for about an hour. Due to the large number of people we have joining, we will keep everybody on mute just to avoid any background noise, but we do encourage your participation by using the questions box feature on your GoToWebinar panel. We want this to be an interactive webinar and I'll be assisting with questions and comments throughout. If we don't manage to answer all of your questions during this webinar, we'll be sure to follow up with you afterwards. And yeah, please just note this is being recorded and we will also send out an email with a link to the recording and slides within the next few days. And this will also include a complimentary resource, Psychology of Teams ebook. So first, a little bit about the Myers-Briggs company. We are a mission-driven organization with a 65-year history. From our headquarters in Northern California to offices in the UK, France, Germany, Netherlands, Australia and Singapore, and international network partners, we provide the tools and insights to enhance business performance. Our mission is to inspire everyone to lead more successful and fulfilling lives. And the way we accomplish that mission is by enriching people's understanding of themselves and others. And we deliver on this through our talent identification and development consultancy services, along with also offering certification in trusted psychometric assessments for those practitioners who are looking to bring the capability in-house. So you can see on this slide that we are a certified B Corporation, otherwise known as B Corp. This means that we've gone through an official certification process to be recognized as a socially responsible organization. There are around 5,000 organizations globally, large and small, that have done this, and we think it's a good thing and encourage you to learn more about it. One of the many things we do as a B Corp is partner with not-for-profit companies each year to support them in all the ways that we can. And this year we've actually partnered with the Australian charity Take 3 for the Sea, whose mission is to reduce plastics in our oceans. They encourage everyone to pick up 3 pieces of plastic from beaches and waterways, and our employees at the Myers-Briggs company have already donated over 80 volunteer hours towards this course. So our presenter today is Dr. Martin Bolt, Senior Director of Professional Services and Psychologist at the Myers-Briggs company. Martin has over 2 decades of experience helping a diverse range of teams from board level to executive management and operational teams. He is often engaged to help newly formed teams fast track their development or support established teams that are struggling to realize their potential. This year, he's been conducting research with his colleagues investigating how psychological safety and well-being affects teamwork. He's also been a guest on the Myers-Briggs Company podcast episode titled Connecting with the People You Lead. And today he's sharing with us ways to understand and work with the psychology of teams. And so with that, I will hand over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Vicky, and welcome everyone for joining. And I've just got my webcam going just so you can see there's a real person here. It's not an avatar or a bot, as we find more and more of those systems being used today. So great that everyone could join our session today. I won't leave my camera on the whole time, but just to give a bit of an overview of what we're going to tackle in our session today. So we'll look at why teams matter more than ever today, particularly in our modern workplace, and we'll explore what does it mean to be part of a team, say, versus a work group. We'll look at why teamwork can actually be a challenge and what are some of the factors that present to that, and also what are some of the hidden barriers that might prevent teams working at their best. So that'll lead us into the 7 psychological factors that we've identified for successful teams. And of course, many of you probably think, well, how do you take this information forward? So we definitely have included some tips for working with these kind of team dynamics. Now, as Vicky mentioned, we do want to get your input and thoughts on this, and we wanted to get your participation straight up now by participating in a brief poll that we've got. And what I'll ask you to do is think about, what does research on teams show is the most important for high performance or for high performance in a team. So we've got 4 options here for you to select from or to vote on. Is the most important factor the professional and technical skills of team members? Or is it the team rewards and incentives that a team has or receives? Does it have to do with the attitudes, personality, relationships of team members? Or is it to do with having clear team goals and processes? So we're going to give everyone a moment just to respond to the poll. And if you select which of those 4 you think from team research has been found to be the most important for team success. And Vicky, when you think we've had a chance for everyone to respond, it'd be good to see what the poll's revealing.
Yeah, great. Thank you for everybody who has voted. We've got 2 clear front runners. So we had 0% vote for professional and technical skills on the top there. We had 1% vote for team rewards and incentives, 66% with attitudes, personality and relationships of team members, and 34% clear team goals and processes.
Okay, well, first of all, thanks everyone for putting your votes in. I think there was a clear majority on one of those options, and it happens to be the option that the research supports. So yes, attitudes, personality and relationships have been found to be the biggest factor on whether a team is successful or not. Now, it's not to say that professional and technical skills are not important, but they're usually what's needed just to become part of a team. And rewards, incentives, goals and processes all play a part in how a team works together. But what we've actually found is that the ingredient that has the biggest impact on whether a team is successful is to do with their personality, their relationships. So these kind of psychological factors. And organizations typically select people into teams based on their skills, their knowledge, their experience, and that is important. And also organizations are usually quite good at knowing what are the goals or policies that a team needs to work with. But what can sometimes get overlooked is how do you actually have a group of people with different backgrounds, personality, different preferences? How does that actually play out when you bring them together and expect them to operate as a team? And what we've actually found is that teams who can better understand how to use and incorporate those differences in personality, relationship styles are the ones that tend to be the most effective teams. And teams are found to be important here because they can actually outperform other groups of people in solving problems, as long as you have a good understanding of the factors that are influencing the team's interactions with each other. The other factor that also comes up that we don't have on screen is the size of a team and what the team's trying to do. So there is some research showing that small teams or small size teams actually do a better job of generating new ideas or new approaches that challenge existing or the status quo, whereas larger teams tend to be better at taking those ideas and implementing them. So that's what the research is pointing to. And I guess the key takeaways we're hoping people get from today's session is a better understanding of some of the psychological dynamics that actually affect team performance. Also, how to help teams work with the visible and hidden dynamics. And as I mentioned earlier, to leave you with some tips if you're a team leader, a team member, or someone who's working directly with teams to help them develop. Now, again, we did want to get a little bit more experience from yourselves, and we've got a question here that will ask you to share a brief written response, and you can do that by typing your response into the questions box. So the question we'd ask you to consider is, when have you felt part of a successful team? From your experience, when was a time you were enjoying working in that particular team, you thought it was successful? What made that team successful, or how did it feel working in that team for you? So Vicky, I'll just give a few minutes for, a few moments, not minutes, for people to just get some responses in there. And when you think we've got some responses, it'd be great to hear what the audience is sharing today.
Yeah, great. Thank you, everyone. So we've got things like feeling trusted, when everybody's contributing and taking initiative. Trust is quite a common theme that's coming through. Feeling respected and safe and psychologically safe as well. So I'd say they're some of the common themes, as well as feeling rewarded.
Okay, great. All right, so there's it sounds like there are some themes there around trust and feeling psychologically safe, but also feeling rewarded. So that's good to get a sense of what it's like to be part of a successful team. Now we'll actually again ask everyone just to briefly share a response around any experiences you may have had working with a team that doesn't work well together. What was your experience of it? What did it feel like to you? What was it like being part of that team, particularly if you felt it really wasn't working well as a team? So again, just to give a few moments for people to share their experiences and responses to that one as well. And again, Vicky, when you think you've got some responses to call out, please do.
Yeah, so we've got things like finding it demotivating, no collaboration, not engaging, feeling isolated, and frustrated. So quite a few common reoccurring ones there.
Okay, oh, excellent. So first of all, thanks everyone for sharing your thoughts on that. Again, some common themes come through when I've worked with teams that weren't performing well. They often talk about a bit of frustration that goes on because the team's not working at its full potential, but also it can start to feel stressful after a period of time as well. Okay, so we're going to take a closer look then at what are some of the factors that influence how people work, particularly in a team setting. I'm not going to leave my camera on because it might be a bit distracting, but I'll bring that back as we come to the end.
So Martin, people have been working together since the beginning of human history. So why are teams so important for today's workplace?
Yeah, so it's an important thing to think about. Teams have been around for a while, as you said, Vicky, but rapid changes in technology and how the world of work uses technology, plus other things like increased globalization, actually mean that organizations and businesses are facing problems that are a lot more complex today than what might have been the case in the past. And where problems or decisions in the past might have been easily made by a single person, the level of complexity in many businesses and organizations today means that one person really doesn't have all the necessary knowledge to solve problems. This is where teams become essential. And the organizations that are best equipped to deal with complex decisions and problems are those that have teams where people can use their unique skills and their experience, but use that in a way where they're collaborating very effectively. So workplaces today are built largely around most people being part of a team. So even from your own experience and think about the work you do, there'll be times where you're operating independently, but when we get to businesses of many different sizes, there are going to be teams underpinning outcomes that the business is needing to achieve. And it's become even more important to have teams working well together, particularly in our current era where we have the hybrid combination of in-person work and online teamwork. And whilst that's added another dimension in how teams work together, the fundamentals of what makes a team successful have remained pretty consistent over time. So what we do know is effective teams will outperform individuals in getting outcomes or solving problems. But when they are doing that, it requires them to be very aware of how to best work with each other in order to get the most out of efficiency, productivity, and the diversity of perspectives. We also know that teams are a critical factor for people's work satisfaction and well-being. So as we just heard earlier from our audience, people in a team that seems to be working well together, it can be very rewarding and lead to high levels of satisfaction and even support people's well-being. Also, being part of a dysfunctional team can have an impact on people's job satisfaction, well-being, and we know that when satisfaction diminishes, so does performance.
So in the ebook, The Psychology of Teams, you make a distinction between teams and work groups, Martin. Can you maybe explain how they're different and provide some examples?
Sure. So this is probably one of the first things I ask a group to do when they're asking me to do some team development work with them, and that is for them to really think about what does it mean to be part of a team and to operate as a team, and what does it mean to be part of a work group or to operate as a work group, and really for them to reflect on should they be a team or should they be a work group, and how are they currently functioning. So let's take a closer look at what does it mean to be actually part of a team. So based on research and also our experience of what teams actually do, the first thing that's understood in a team is that everyone is there to achieve the team's goals. They're not there to achieve individual outcomes. It's more about what does the team collectively need to achieve. Also, it's understood that in order to achieve those goals, there's mutual accountability. So the team cannot be successful unless the members coordinate their activities with each other and they understand that they're all accountable. For teams to be very successful, they need to have a purpose, a common purpose that they all line up around. And in many cases, that needs to be shaped by the team themselves. And when teams do get up and running and being quite effective, although there may be an appointed leader, such as a team leader or manager, that doesn't mean that other members of the team can't share the leadership responsibility. At certain times, a team might be dealing with a challenge, a problem, a decision that is best led by another member of the team rather than just the appointed leader. Teams are also evaluated on their collective outputs. What did they achieve together rather than what have they done individually? But to get all of those pieces in place, it takes time to be operational as a team. So it's not easy to have a team up and running just after a 1 hour meeting or even just a few days of working together. The understanding is to get to a high level of functioning, time and experience working together needs to play out in order to get to that operational level. One of the questions I'll ask a group of people who call themselves a team is I say, okay, when you do come together, such as in a meeting, what is it that you're doing when you come together? If they tell me that they're planning, making decisions and solving problems together, that's evidence, behavioural evidence, that they're actually operating as a team. And of course, what we know is when a team does get to that very high level of functioning, it will outperform any other group of people on the same task. So what would be some examples? There are some obvious ones. A lot of people refer back to sporting teams, and it's very clear in a sporting team what the goal is. It's to win or perform the best in the competition, and that has to be done in a coordinated way. Another example where you might find people operating in teams would be in an emergency department of a hospital. When a patient's wheeled in to be treated, everyone in that medical team has a common goal, and that is to treat and save the patient, and they need to do that in a coordinated and effective way. If they don't, the patient can actually have a less favourable outcome. Or another example of where people are behaving as a team would be an orchestra or a musical band, where each musician has a part to play, but if one of the musicians is not playing their part correctly, you can actually hear the disharmony in the piece of music. And I think that's a nice analogy of you can have disharmony musically, but you can also have disharmony in a psychological way within a team. Now, the other kind of groups that you can have in organizations, and they're often needed at times, are work groups. So what's the difference there? When people are part of a work group, it's understood that they're there to get individual needs met by the work group. It's not about achieving something collectively as a work group. It's also understood that there's individual accountability. So everyone's only responsible for their own area in that work group. And in many cases, the purpose of that work group is shaped by the appointed leader or manager. You're not expecting people to contribute to building that purpose. When people are part of a work group, they'll often retain their individual roles and responsibilities. So it's understood that they're not there to help another member of the work group do their part. And that's why you can have literally like a group of specialists all working on the one outcome. Work groups tend to be more evaluated on what each individual person does rather than what the group does. And because of that, work groups can be operationalized very quickly. It would be possible to have a 1 hour or 30-minute meeting and leave that meeting and have the work group up and running. Now, behaviorally, what work groups do when they come together is more about information sharing. It's not collective problem solving or decision making. It's more like just what's going on from each person's perspective or their role. And whilst work groups get things done, we know the highest functioning work groups still won't outperform a high functioning team. An example that's often highlighted to me is in my experience of when doing home renovation, you have a number of people working on the building. You have a carpenter, you have a plumber, you have an electrician. Now, they are not expected to operate as a team, because if the carpentry work is getting delayed, you don't have the plumber helping the carpenter achieve their piece. Another interesting scenario is when I've been asked to do work with sales teams, and I often ask them, so what are you actually incentivized and rewarded to do? And many of them will acknowledge they're rewarded for individual outcomes, not necessarily for mutual accountability. So the point is, have the group get clear about, do they need to be a team or a work group, and then how are they currently functioning?
So if teams have these dynamics affecting their teamwork, how does the leader and the teams address these dynamics?
So when we're thinking about some challenges that come up with teamwork, and again, most of us have had experiences where teams haven't been successful. I've spent a lot of time and a great deal of time studying and observing teams and how they've worked and how they're not working together. And over many years, I've seen most teams have people with the skills and knowledge and experience that are needed in that team. And they also have interest in what the team needs to achieve. But it also means you're building a team that's made up of people with sometimes seemingly incompatible viewpoints or different communication styles or different work styles. So when you bring those together and just don't pay attention to those differences, these are the psychological factors of a team which many teams overlook and sometimes even avoid exploring. So the hidden factors of teamwork are really where you have individual people being influenced by, first of all, their own dynamics that are both conscious or unconscious. And by that I mean, at work, an individual person is conscious of how they're going to use their knowledge, their skills, their experience to play their part in the team. But they may be less aware of how their underlying personality preferences, motivations, or interests, or even fears shape their behavior in response to working with the team. So that's at the individual level. Now, similarly, when you bring teams together, what you're really doing is bringing a collection of people with their own conscious and unconscious influences. And that plays out in and affects how teams actually operate together. So most team members become aware of the knowledge and skills of their teammates. However, the team is not always aware of the unconscious motivations or some of the agendas or even biases that affect how they're going to work together. So for example, I've seen members of a team in a meeting share different views on a decision and are constructively debating it, but then they fell silent when the team leader expressed their view and the rest of the team just stopped discussing the topic for the remainder of the meeting. And no one really pointed out what was going on there. Why did they just stop discussing the topic or exploring it further? I've also seen another team where the team members aligned their views with a person who was not the appointed leader. And they more or less started to agree and support the ideas of another team member. And it was actually later revealed to me through individual interviews with the team members that many of them didn't respect the appointed leader. But no one was willing to call that out or talk about why people were deciding to side with one person's ideas versus another. So teams can often overlook or avoid exploring these hidden factors, which then can result in quite disruptive relationships or poor decision making, and sometimes even dysfunctional behaviors in a team.
So with the hidden elements that you've just spoken to, how can leaders help to illuminate those and identify them?
Yeah, so the key thing here is a team needs to really engage in building enough trust and comfort to raise their thoughts, their ideas, their concerns, but also to explore the dynamics of what's going on when they're working together, both in person and more remotely. And most teams are more than comfortable exploring, discussing their work tasks. What do we need to get done today? But they're not always comfortable or equipped to know how to discuss the dynamics.
So by tasks, are we talking about the work tasks, such as like who completes each section of a project or what each team member is responsible for delivering?
Yes, Vicky, that's exactly it. So the tasks are what each person does to get the job done. But that is only part of what affects whether a team is effective or not. So again, these hidden unconscious dynamics are affecting how all teams go about working together or not working together. And that's playing out even when people are focused on these observable tasks. Now, many teams will skip over or assume they know how to constructively collaborate and work together without realizing there are visible and invisible dynamics that are actually affecting that teamwork. So to take a closer look at what some of these visible and invisible dynamics are, on the screen here we've got, from research and our experience working with all kinds of teams, a bit of a map of the major psychological factors that influence whether a team is successful or not. So you'll see in this diagram, it shows which factors are more visible, the ones that are above the surface. These, when I say visible, these are things that all the team members are conscious of and aware of. But then there are also less visible factors that can often influence teamwork at a more unconscious or unspoken level. And some factors that are here on the screen at times might be conscious and visible. The team are working with that factor. And then other times the actual factor might be hidden more beneath the surface and the team are not paying as much attention to it. So many teams will focus more and are usually comfortable focusing on the visible behaviors of working when considering how to improve their team performance. So they'll often start with, how do we get this task done? And it's less about, but how are we going about completing our work together? While this is important to look at these visible factors, without considering the hidden elements that lie below the surface, a team can risk derailing without realizing it until it's too late. And if these hidden elements are ignored, which some teams do, the observable surface behaviors or the tasks that they're trying to work on are performed suboptimally.
And so what are the hidden dynamics and how do teams become more aware of them?
Okay, so the elements of team behavior which may be hidden or less conscious in the actions of the team include things like the level of trust that members of the team have with each other, and that ultimately underpins the level of psychological safety. Psychological safety really being, how much do I feel I can take risks, interpersonal risks with this team and not feel embarrassed, berated or punished. And when a team has psychological safety, it allows the team to psychologically commit to the team's purpose and goals, or to even voice concerns where they think the purpose and goals are not hitting the mark. So the starting place for any team development and getting comfortable looking at these hidden dynamics is really creating and establishing trust and psychological safety. I've seen without that, teams really aren't comfortable or confident talking about some of the uncomfortable issues. And while there are multiple team exercises that start that process of building trust, the team leader also plays a big part in creating psychological safety in the team. How much does the leader make it safe for people to voice their concerns? Another factor that builds trust is the experience of working together on real challenges, and that helps further build trust in a team. So it's important for the team to spend time defining their purpose, what they need to do, and also agreeing to how they're going to evaluate if they're actually living their purpose, working together, so they're actually doing things that support the purpose. And this can take some time, especially in the early stages of a team working together. But time spent creating and working with a team purpose pays off in the long term.
And what might be the more visible aspects of team dynamics, if you could go into that for us too?
Okay, so the elements that are more overt or easier to observe include how adaptable the team is to change. So that includes things like the agreed processes that the team use together, such as meeting agendas or project plans and how they're going to work those together. And the observable ways also include how the team align to holding each other accountable on agreed actions. So in a team meeting, you can see that accountability playing out when members are saying, okay, who hasn't done this part or what needs to get done here? Or another observable element would be how the leadership plays out in the group, how they exercise leadership with each other. And many work teams are quick to clarify what tasks and the methods that they're going to use to get their tasks done, but they often don't check if their tasks or processes or decisions even align with their team purpose. And some teams can actually expend a great deal of energy and a great amount of time focusing on tasks or doing things that actually have little impact on the team performance. So to discuss these issues, the team, as I said before, need to have that trust and purpose established first.
So you've mentioned in the Psychology of Teams ebook that there are team factors that are both hidden and visible. What does this look like?
Yeah, so these are the ones on the previous map where I said they're kind of sometimes above the surface, sometimes a bit below the surface, sometimes visible, other times hidden. And this will be things like how teams address conflict or how they go about debating issues with each other. Sometimes it's clear why they're engaging in that conflict and they know why they are. Other times it's less clear that or they're less comfortable raising the conflict. And also how they go about communicating both positive and negative communication with each other. For example, does the team tend to keep their conversations to safe topics, which might be a sign that they're not addressing some of the hidden factors around trust? Or are they willing to raise potentially challenging issues in a way that respects different communication preferences and different work styles? So that would be an example where they're using it in a more visible or conscious way. And this is where team development assessments like personality tools like the Myers-Briggs type indicator or MBTI can be really helpful in giving a constructive framework and language for people to talk about these elements of how they work together or communicate together in a way that makes it more conscious. It's not hidden beneath the surface. And these kind of assessments can be helpful for illuminating how personality preferences or decision-making styles or interpersonal preferences can either help or hinder team communication and conflict. So it's important to not only help team members increase awareness of their own personality preferences, but also to find ways to see how, when you bring everyone's personality preferences together, how that plays out when they work collectively together. And from that, I've using those kind of assessments with teams, I've found it's helpful for them to identify what are their team strengths, what are the things collectively they'll do very well and comfortably together, but also where are their blind spots? What are the things they might overlook or avoid looking at that help or hinder the teamwork as it relates to their team purpose?
So Martin, you've said that team leaders and team members all have a role in addressing team dynamics, and you've also worked as a team development facilitator. So what are some of the tips for leaders, teams and facilitators that you could offer?
Sure, okay, so let's take a look at these. So I'll start with team leaders because obviously some of you who've joined our session today have a team that you're responsible for leading. And from, again, research of what we've seen of teams that are successful, they have a leader who sets the tone and also role models trust and psychological safety. So as I mentioned earlier, that's where the leader creates an environment where everyone in the team starts to feel that they can talk quite openly and raise concerns or highlight errors and mistakes without anyone feeling like they're going to be embarrassed or berated. So the leader does play a big part in influencing whether the team feels psychologically safe or not. Also, effective team leaders are the ones that create opportunities for the team to discuss and address not only the tasks that they're working on together, but how they're working on that together, the process issues. And the successful team leaders I've seen who do that as part of their meetings, team meetings, they'll actually allow time for both issues to be explored and drawing the team out on that. Many team leaders who build successful teams are those that invest time building team spirit through meaningful team development exercises. Now, whilst it might be fun and great to take a team to lunch and enjoy each other's company that way, that only goes so far in meaningful team development. So this is where teams need to take some time to say, how are we going to work together, and actually using some of the learning and assessments to build that team spirit. And also, effective team leaders are those that allow opportunities for the team to reflect on and learn from successes where the team's achieved or exceeded what they wanted to do, but also where the team fell short or where there were failures. And again, that's where the trust and psychological safety is important, to have quite open and frank discussions about those successes and failures. Now, team members also play a part in whether the team's going to be successful. So what can you do if you're a member of a team? Well, first of all, find a way to contribute to the team purpose. Once the team has built a purpose that they all agree to, it's really important that each team member then plays a part in supporting that purpose through their own roles, their own skills or contributions. Also, I've found the most successful teams are the ones where the team members are willing to learn how to work with the team. So rather than expecting the team fit around an individual team member, they go looking for, well, how can I work best with the team and learn from them? Which involves team members being curious and respectful of different work or communication preferences that other members of the team might have. And whilst other people may prefer to do things or communicate in a way different to how we would, I've found the most effective teams are the ones that learn about those differences and use that difference in a respectful way. Also, team members can find ways to use their strengths. And again, this is not just knowledge and skill strengths, but personal strengths or personality strengths to support the team, and that they don't withhold those strengths, but they offer them to the team. And also being willing to acknowledge what their own individual blind spots are, or where they might struggle with something that they need to do for the team, and therefore being willing to ask or accept help from team members. And again, coming back to the trust and safety, I find team members are more willing to ask for help or accept help from each other where they feel comfortable with that trust level. And the most successful teams are the ones where they reach a point where each team member can hold each other accountable. They're not waiting for the team leader to come back and point out what's being missed or what needs to be improved, but in fact, they're doing that with each other. And if you see successful sports teams, you can sometimes see that them doing that, picking each other up on what's not happening or working on the sporting field. It also happens in work teams as well. Now, for those of you who are part of our session today who are more the team facilitators, the people who run sessions and workshops to help people in a team function successfully, again, here are some tips that are important for team facilitators. First of all, having the knowledge and experience of how to actually help teams identify the effects of both the visible and hidden team dynamics is an essential set of skills for team facilitators. And this is often where team facilitators have the biggest impact in helping a team, is helping the team become aware of some of those hidden dynamics. It also becomes important to use well-researched assessments or validated team frameworks when you're taking a team through team learning sessions or workshops, and helping them build insights about how they function as a team. Creating a safe learning space for all members of the team. Again, can be a challenge sometimes where some members of the team feel more comfortable with the facilitator than others. So it's how the facilitator goes about creating safety amongst the whole team. Effective team facilitators also reinforce that the team are responsible for not only selecting but implementing the development actions. I've seen over many years of working with teams, some of them start to put the responsibility back on me, the facilitator, to come up with the actions. And that's a recipe for the team not actually taking the learning forward. So being willing to challenge a team to set their own agendas and actions from the learning. And probably the most important thing for team facilitators is with the learning and insights that the team members get from the assessments and team building sessions, it's how do they then apply that to live projects or real decisions that they have to make with each other. So see how you can help the team integrate the learning into the doing.
So Martin, as you've consulted with many teams, is there an example that you can share of a team you've worked with that have benefited from looking at their team dynamics?
Sure, Vicky, and I thought there'd be an opportunity to do this. So I'll just quickly talk about this case study. Now, this was an executive team that was newly formed during the COVID pandemic, and the CEO or the head of this team, very early on in the team's life, wanted to fast track helping the team learn how to best work with each other. And also, they recognized that it was really important for the team to have a clear team purpose for leading that business. Because she said, if this team is not lined up around common understanding and purpose, then the whole business will not be lined up. Now, what she did is ask me to put together a team development process that I facilitated over a series of months. So we started with helping each member of the team learn about their personality preferences and interpersonal needs and how that plays out when they're part of a team. So the assessments we used there were the Myers-Briggs type indicator, which helps people measure what is their underlying personality type amongst a framework of 16 personality types. It's also a useful framework for understanding not just my own preferences, but what does it mean when I'm working with someone who has different preferences to myself. We also looked at interpersonal needs, because often people have different levels of interpersonal need, and that was through another personality measure called the FIRO, measuring to what extent does a person need to feel included, to be able to influence, or to also build very close, intimate relationships with others. And so having that understanding in the team helped them quickly explore some of those hidden aspects of their team behavior, but using those assessments to explore those hidden aspects in a very constructive and psychologically safe way. So once each of the members had a good read of their own personality and interpersonal needs, we then brought them together in 3 team workshops. Some were run in person, some were online, where the team identified and also openly discussed what they would do well together based on their learning about their styles and preferences, but also where there could be potential points of conflict or misunderstanding emerging. And with that, discussions and observations about that, they were able to head off any misunderstanding or conflict that would otherwise play out if they didn't have that framework of learning about different needs and personality preferences. It also helped them as a team recognize where they might be very similar in their communication or work styles, and therefore what they might potentially overlook together, the team blind spots. So to help them apply the learning from the personality assessments and the team workshops, I also scheduled with them some team coaching sessions, some brief coaching sessions between the workshops. This is where they could keep working on how they were going to build their performance using the knowledge from the team development workshops and assessments, but applying it back to live issues they were needing to address. So they also spent time defining an agreed team purpose, and what they ended up doing is using that to apply it to their meetings. At the top of a meeting, they went back to their team purpose to frame, okay, what are we going to use our meeting time for today that fits with our purpose? Or when they came to a challenging decision as a team, they used the team purpose as, again, a guide for what they needed to consider in the decision making. So this team, as a result of it spending the time doing that team development, not only navigated some unexpected challenges arising from working through the COVID pandemic, but they also had significant improvements, they told me, in staff engagement, which the feedback came back had a lot to do with how they as a leadership team were working. That also did translate into improved business performance. And this year they shared with me that they were actually recognised by their global parent organisation for being one of the teams that successfully led a difficult business restructure. Now, the team members said that without investing in the time learning together and getting down to some of those deeper, more hidden dynamics, they believe they would have actually struggled with some of the business challenges that came along the way. Now, there are many more elements to how this team actually became successful, but much of the principles of what I took them through and how they learnt are covered in the ebook, Psychology of Teams, which Vicky mentioned is part of this webinar. So with that, again, you can come back to that ebook and look at some of the ways that teams can work with the hidden and also visible dynamics. But if I can leave everyone with the principle that I think serves as a good reminder when you're bringing together a group of people to operate as a team, and it comes from a African proverb, as I understand. It's, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you need to go together. And I hope that gives a theme or a sentiment people can keep in mind about how you bring people together to get the most out of teams. So with that, before we go to some questions, I might hand back to you, Vicky.
Great, thanks for that, Martin. So I want to quickly just highlight one of our workshops that really helps tackle the challenges Martin just walked us through. So the MBTI Virtual Live Series is a series of online workshops for small groups or teams. Each workshop has been carefully designed to help participants develop the self-awareness and soft skills critical to working together and collaborating more effectively. You can also work with our psychologists like Martin and team development experts to go beneath the surface and get lasting impact for your teams with a more custom-built option. I'll be sending out information around both of these along with the recording, slides, and other resources after this webinar. Just a quick reminder that within that email that we'll be sending out, we will also include the Psychology of Teams, which is a complimentary ebook, and along with also some useful blogs too. So we have got time just for a few quick questions. So sure. It'd be great to get your thoughts on these that we've had submitted, Martin. So how do you help teams sustain the improvements or changes they make from team training?
Okay, yeah, and again, one of the challenges I know other team facilitators said to me is that in a session or a workshop where a team are learning about themselves as a team, it can be fun, it can be insightful, but then they go back to work and they kind of just fall back into old habits. So one of the things that I've found is the most useful is getting the team to identify what they have learnt about themselves in that team session and how they work, both those hidden and visible dynamics, and then get them to apply that learning to a live issue, be it a project that they have to complete together, a decision or a problem they need to solve together, and to find moments where they reflect and check in about how their teamwork is helping or hindering the outcome that they're working to. So helping them connect it back to live issues, I think, is the best way of sustaining the learning.
Great, thanks for that. Also, we've got one here. What is something you can do to get a team comfortable discussing their team dynamics?
Yeah, it probably starts with, and I get people to reflect on relationships outside of work where you feel the most comfortable being open and talking about even some of the more controversial or uncomfortable issues with another person. It's all premised on trust. So if I raise this concern that the person understands it's coming with good intent and that I'm I'm raising a concern or an issue because it's going to benefit both of us to be able to explore it or discuss it. So translating that back to teams, you need to help teams get to a point where they have that level of comfort with each other. Now that doesn't happen overnight. So some of it is just time spent with each other and working together. But again, I've found if teams are only focusing on the work and the tasks, they're often not getting to know each other at the level where they build deeper trust. And that's where they are comfortable exploring how they prefer to do things, or where there might be a frustration in how another person's approaching a situation. That you actually have to create some opportunities for that. And that can be done through formal team building, which is probably the fast track way of doing that. The other time is a team sometimes, but as a byproduct of dealing with a really challenging or stressful issue, sometimes form that level of comfort discussing the dynamics. But what, as I mentioned earlier, often organizations put a group of people together to function as a team, and then they just expect them to get up and running without allowing some time for that exploration of dynamics. So formal team development that digs into those issues is probably the most powerful and sustainable way of doing that.
Great, thank you. We've got one more here. How can you help rebuild trust when trust has been damaged or eroded already within a team?
Yeah, and there's probably not one way of doing that, because a lot of it has to do with is the level of trust or mistrust at a point where it's hard to have anyone feel like trust can be re-established. I've worked with some teams where trust was low early on, and what they often found, it was coming from a misunderstanding or misinterpretation of other people's intentions. So that, again, you'd have to have an opportunity and probably a facilitated session exploring why people feel trust is low, what's contributed to it, but also then that people have an opportunity to explain what's going on if there were different views or opinions on trust. There are sometimes, and it's just a fact of the matter, that someone will form a view that they don't trust a person or a team. And I think the first thing is acknowledging, if that's how they feel, is it going to be conducive for that person to remain part of that team? So it's really up to building an environment where people feel safe enough to raise their concerns and talk about what their view of trust is, and then allowing time for that team to work with those issues.
Yeah, great. There's a couple actually with this theme around working remotely. So how can you help team leaders when they work remotely in bringing the team together? There's, I think, a few common ones around, I guess, that hybrid and remote work and the impact of these learnings to those teams.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I've spent a lot of time during, particularly the COVID period, where a lot of people were working entirely remotely, and talking to other team leaders that managed to navigate that reasonably well and have a team working through that period of time, that even though they were remote or hybrid, they came out the other end feeling quite unified as a team. So the first thing was, do they all understand and agree to what the team is there to do and achieve? And again, that goes beyond task. Yes, there are tasks that teams need to get done, but the why. Why are we doing this together? How does this help us, other people, other parts of the organization, clients that we serve? So getting really clear about that purpose. Now, that means the team needs to be involved in shaping that purpose. And I think the effective leaders were the ones that got their team engaged with that. The hybrid world still allows for interactions between team members. And again, we all have this online format of doing that. But what it requires is probably more conscious effort of how we working together online. And again, getting teams to think about what's playing out that we're all aware of. Is there some things that we're not paying attention to or we're avoiding? And to have those kind of conversations online, again, it really needs to be premised on trust. So I think purpose and establishing trust are still ways that hybrid teams work very successfully together, but there is a higher chance of misunderstanding or misinterpreting a person's intentions in the online world because you don't have that in-person catch-up. So I think leaders who dedicate time in building that shared understanding are the ones that minimize misunderstanding.
Great, thank you. And I think we've got time for maybe just one more. So we've got one here saying, what is a good way to get upper management interested in working on the hidden dynamics? And how might you suggest people approach this with their managers?
Okay, upper management. I guess what I would say for any team or a decision maker about does a team need to address something, I simply start with, is this team performing to their full potential? Is there anything that this team could be doing they're not doing? And if that's recognized, the team's not performing to their full potential, that becomes the starting point to say, okay, what's contributing to that? Now, sometimes it's due to they're in a structure or an environment that is working against what the team actually needs to do, maybe even at a task level. They're easier things to solve. But when a team has all the necessary skills, knowledge, resources to do the task and they're still not performing, it's then asking the key decision makers, is that something you're willing to just live with, or do you want to actually do something to address it? And also, what does it mean if this team is just left to their own devices to continue? And so I found most decision makers, particularly in the senior management, don't want to have teams underperforming. They don't want people feeling like they're wasting their time and again, feeling dissatisfied or stressed about working in a team. So that becomes reasons to do something to address it. Again, sometimes a leader will say, the team will be fine, we'll leave them alone. Then I wouldn't expect to force a team development session. So a lot of it has to do with, if you kept doing what they're doing, what's the likely outcome?
Great. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there, and hopefully everybody will be appreciative of getting a couple of minutes back in their diary. Thank you so much for all those who submitted their questions. And thank you, Martin, for a great presentation and for all those insights and answers to those questions at the end.
Thanks, Vicky, and thanks everyone who joined us today. Hope that was of interest.